basically, there was a Christian show that happened at Babycastles before, and then there was this, and then for the news space, one of the first things that Babycastles wanted to do was to put together an Islamic video game show. And so basically, most of my contribution were like this downfall of questions that I had for Sayed. And I think what I want to do is kind of ask the same question to the audience while we look at this exhibit on its last day. But before I do that, like something interesting happened that I just want to talk about. The Huffington Post just posted an article earlier this week about an art initiative that explores the imagined space where Islam meets LA. And it's the LA Islam Arts Initiative. And it's like this brand new thing. And they have an HTML5 responsive website, and it's all so cool. And it's interesting because, like, kind of the Huffington Post article, it was basically 2 paragraphs and a bunch of pictures from the collection. And it looked like this Tumblr of what, like, you know, like an Islamic LA, you know, like, kind of, and it got me thinking about this show. And it's interesting because I know 2 people whose works are being featured, and neither of them are Muslim, right? But they come from Lebanon, and so it begs the question of, what do we mean when we say an Islamic show? And one of the things that I told Sayyid earlier on is that the Christian show had a very specific narrative, right? It was games based on the Christian faith that couldn't make it into Nintendo, that ended up being, you know, developed and hacked and whatever. And for me, that was an interesting narrative to base the show on. But like Babycastles isn't alone, right? Like there's the new museum has here in Nasr, like an Arab show, that like a contemporary Arab art show that takes over the entire museum. There's this like kind of sudden realization that, you know, the global South makes contemporary art. Oh my goodness, right? Like, you know, and that realization is starting to grow more and more. But still, like, we have these identity-based show. Like our first way to interact with the subject matter is to have these different, and it's not just Islam, it's like different global South identities, right? Like, and so I think that's interesting that we are in this kind of space regarding contemporary art, video games included. So yeah, like, what does an Islamic show mean? Like, out of these works, how many of these works are directly related to the Islamic faith, right? Like, how many of them? And kind of this categorization is interesting because it often includes people who are not Muslim, who come from Muslim majority countries, right? And that kind of has been the historic, like, even if we want to go into like medieval Islamic art, like a lot of the works that were created by non-Muslim artists and artisans, but still it's lumped into this larger kind of framework, and I think that's really interesting. But yeah, I think, so yeah, my questions are, what do we mean when we say Muslim show? What do we mean when we say, like, are there like racialized aspects of Muslim? Like, are we using Muslim and brown interchangeably? Are we using Muslim and Arab interchangeably? Are we using Muslim and South Asian interchangeably? And basically, what does it mean to have these shows that are based on specific identities, that are based on specific like minority and global South identities? And for me, the most exciting question is what's next, right? Like, how do we start viewing work within, not necessarily abandon this framework, but look at different frameworks when it comes to these kinds of works? And how does this show, like how does Assalamualaikum Babycastles play into this, you know, larger kind of awareness of art coming out of the global South? And how can it be part of the conversation moving forward? Thank you.